Charles Ling may not have won the Golden Bachelorette, but he stole the hearts of viewers. Charles was one of 24 men competing for the affection of Joan Vassos, who was seeking a second chance at love after the heartbreaking death of her husband to cancer. Charles was on his own journey of healing after losing his wife to a brain aneurysm 6 years earlier. Charles, a retired financial analyst, quickly won over the audience with his inspirational comeback story. The 66-year-old built a life for himself and his family after emigrating from China with only $20 to his name. When he arrived at the mansion, Charles was still battling grief and unanswered questions about his wife's death. But through his time with the Golden Bachelorette Season 1 lead Joan and, more importantly, the other Golden men, Charles found confidence and healing. His lovable personality quickly made him a fan favorite and a top candidate to become the next Golden Bachelor. Charles Ling is too sensitive. The pressure of a lead role may be too much. Charles was a breath of fresh air on the Golden Bachelorette. Surrounded by men who wanted to impress Joan with their strength and aggressive masculinity, Charles stood out. He was honest about how intimidating the group dates were for him, having never attended prom or played kickball. Instead of putting on a strong front, Charles faced his insecurities with humor and an open mind. However, he found himself overpowered by emotions and broke down crying more than once. Charles wasn't the only contestant mourning loss, but his story was particularly heartbreaking. His wife's death was sudden, and Charles grappled with what he had witnessed. It took a conversation with runner-up and physician Guy Gansert for Charles to resolve the guilt following him since his wife's death. Charles was noticeably lighter and more free after his conversation with Guy. His grief had weighed heavily on him for years. Now that Charles can move past the painful details of his wife's death, he can start to move on. But he still might not be emotionally ready to immediately continue with such a high-pressure competition. Charles may benefit from taking more time to work through his complex emotions and ease slowly into dating. Charles Ling is overhyped. There's no way he can uphold his perfect reputation. Charles' popularity gives him an impossibly high standard to uphold. Unlike many of the other Golden Bachelorette contestants, Charles was never mean or aggressive. He spoke fondly about his late wife, his daughters, and his hopes for his future. With such a flawless first impression, any future misstep by Charles would devastate viewers. Fans have flocked to Charles' Instagram, where he has an impressive 44K followers, to voice support for him becoming the next Golden Bachelor. Comments on Charles' recent post referred to him as a king, hero, and star of the show. The audience is holding Charles to a standard that isn't feasible to live up to. If Charles returns to the franchise and isn't as perfect as viewers expect, they may turn against him. Charles Ling might shrink away from backlash. Starring on The Golden Bachelor would open him up to endless criticism. One of the traits that won viewers over was Charles' vulnerability. He was open about his feelings of self-doubt and sorrow after losing the first love of his life. While his sensitivity had viewers rooting for him, it could make Charles a poor choice for The Golden Bachelor Season 2. The starring role comes along with endless scrutiny and criticism. Charles' first television appearance was well received, but he may not be so lucky if his time in the spotlight continues. Viewer criticism could threaten the confidence Charles worked so hard to find. Charles may end up guarding his emotions to protect himself, which would erase the authenticity that made him so popular in the first place. Charles came away as one of the most popular contestants on the Golden Bachelorette Season 1. But if he wants to keep his reputation untarnished, it would be best to avoid starring in The Golden Bachelor. The lead role requires thick skin, whereas the audience falls in love with Charles because of his vulnerability. Considering his newfound popularity, it's likely Charles can find his second chance at love all on his own.